which focuses on the Middle East and Africa region, giving you a lot of information and ideas on how to leverage this emerging region. There are a whole lot of cities that hold a lot of promise, and this webinar will give you in-depth information and insight into how to tap into some of these opportunities. This is the fourth in our GlobalShore series of webinars, and just like every time, we have two great speakers. Jonathan De Luzuriaga, he's the managing director from Tholons. He's engaged in real hands-on research and consulting work in this region, both Middle East and Africa. And we also have Pumela Salela. She is an ITES consultant with the World Bank. The World Bank is very deeply involved in promoting various opportunities and initiatives in the services industry in Africa, and Pumela would give us a very good idea as to how the region is developing and implementing some of these initiatives. As usual, we would take the questions towards the end of the webinar, and we would collect and we would try to answer as many questions as possible, and the ones that remain, we would do them offline. Welcome to the webinar. On to the first slide. I'll just spend a minute here before I hand it over to the speakers today. I just wanted to introduce what we mean by GlobalShore 2010. GlobalShore 2010 is a webinar series that we launched this year in partnership with Tholons. It's a Tholons and Global Services joint production, a webinar series that focuses on the global outsourcing locations. This is built around the Tholons location assessment methodology, and Global Services has been partnering with Tholons for the last 5 years in bringing cutting-edge content, research-based content to the outsourcing, to the worldwide outsourcing industry. And year over year, since we launched this initiative 5 years back, we have been honing our research methodology. We have been really improving the quality of the research and the research output to make it more relevant and useful to the services buyers worldwide. What I mean by that is, like when we launched in 2006, that was the first time that even in the industry that somebody started looking at individual cities as one unit of an outsourcing delivery center. Earlier we were all talking about countries or rather regions, and in 2006 we started talking about cities as being the smallest possible unit to look at a place where delivery can be done, and looking at the specific skills availability within cities. Now that was a very important concept which we further modified on that in 2007. We came up with the concept of centers of excellence, getting identified amongst these cities. We did further work on that for the following 2 years, and started getting much deeper insight into how some of these cities are emerging, how some of these cities are becoming centers of excellence, how some of these cities are getting clustered to deliver certain areas of specialized services. And in 2010, the report is going to focus on not only on one side we're going to continue our the way we look at how cities have been emerging. We are expanding the coverage of cities from traditionally we were looking at 50, now we are going to 100. So that gives us a much more broader view of what new cities are there on the anvil, are there in the under consideration, as well as we have come up with this new concept called as a point of scale resistance, which is understanding that particular point at which all the factors for the growth of a particular city reach its highest point, beyond which there is a resistance to growth. So that is a very interesting point, both for services buyers as well as for providers to understand as to to be able to evaluate various locations on the basis of this parameter, to be able to understand as to whether a particular location is reaching its limit or there is much more steam left in that particular location. All of these findings would be released, in our next webinar. And during the course of these GlobalShore webinars, we have been able to come up with real insights based on the current research, and that's what we are going to do as far as the Middle East and Africa region is concerned, which is the region that we have taken up for closer examination today. So from here on, I would give it on to Jonathan, who would take us through some of Tholons' uppermost findings about this year's research on this region. On to you, Jonathan.
Thank you very much, Ed. As usual, it's an honor for me to be part of this webinar series. This study has really evolved ever since before we even started this. Right now, this particular study is the one that's being hailed as the de facto study for ranking outsourcing cities globally. Of course, we use the Tholons location assessment framework in creating the rankings, and thus far, the evolution that we've seen has been quite positive, which prompted us to actually move it from ranking just 50 locations in the world to what is now going to be revealed for the next webinar series, which is about more than 100 locations. Now, it's very interesting for me to present this this particular webinar because it's something that's quite close to my heart. I've been involved in Middle East and African ITES roadmaps for quite some time now, and I've seen some very interesting things happen in those particular regions. Now, if you look at the slide that you're looking at now, numerous cities all over the world are willing to make adjustments in order to participate in the growth of services globalization. But a significant amount of activity is currently being observed in the Middle East and African regions. I personally have noticed Middle Eastern and African nations taking a very strong interest in services globalizations, and oftentimes you could meet huge delegations coming from these regions and outsourcing conferences and events, such as India's NASSCOM Leadership Forum. This happened sometime in February, as well as the recently concluded Business Processing Association of the Philippines International Outsourcing Summit, of which Kenya was represented. Now, slide 4 basically tells us that it's no surprise that the last World Cup brought positive reviews for Africa, but let us kick off at an ingredient that all service buyers and locators are looking at. With this, I'm actually talking about the cost factor. With lower per capita GDP in the region, this presents a significant cost advantage for all the cities located in both Africa and the Middle East. Comparing per capita GDP of the region with, say, Western and other developed countries, the obvious thing that pops out is how low countries in this region stack up against their more developed counterparts. This logically produces a distinct cost advantage or arbitrage. Now, slide number 5 is another interesting story. As you very well know, Ed, in the Pumela, tick-tock goes the clock. I remember an event that I attended in Asia, and one speaker was describing the predicament of the outsourcing industry workers in this particular region. And they described the workers as caffeine overdosed, sleep-deprived individuals who lack exposure to the sun, thus making them candidates for the next movie in the Twilight series. It may sound a bit humorous, but it's actually true. This is not the case for the cities located in the African and Middle East regions. As we can see in the slide, time difference between London and the cities identified are not that big. Mauritius would have the most time differential with just only 4 hours. Now, we use London as a benchmark here, and it's going to play a very vital piece in the next few slides. Slide 6 basically tells us what we've learned for the past few webinars. The value proposition cornerstone of any outsourcing city would be the availability and employability of the talent. When we speak of employability, it is essential that we take a deep dive into the quality of higher education and training. This region, or the two regions, rank quite well on this aspect, with almost all identified cities gaining a spot within the top 100 ranking in terms of global higher education standards. That is, all except two. So you could see Tunisia here having a very high mark at 32. Israel follows at 36. South Africa is actually at 65. Turkey, you could see them at 73, followed by Mauritius at 79. Kenya ranks 85 in this particular global higher education ranking. Egypt is at 88. Morocco at 99, Ghana at 108, and Zambia at 114. All these scores on the left side of the graph is on a scale of 7. Higher scores indicating actually a better quality. Slide 7 presents two aspects in communication: language availability and language proficiency. There is a scattering of low marks, as you can see here, but quite insignificant if you look at the spread of language availability in the region. And one trend that we're seeing from all service buyers right now is that they're looking at a wider spread of language support. Now, having mixed influences in this region also has its advantages. And when it comes to the language requirements of the service globalization industry, the region definitely gets a green card. As you can see here, these available languages are not readily available in other outsourcing locations. So you got English, which is basically across the board from Egypt to Tunisia. You got the availability of French speakers. You got the availability of German speakers. Arabic, of course, especially for the Middle Eastern countries. And of course, Spanish is also there. Now, language proficiency is almost a similar story. It's across the board when it comes to English, and then there's a merry mix of low, medium, and high ranks for French, German, Arabic, and Spanish. Slide 8 talks about the infrastructure. Now, there are still some areas for improvement in terms of infrastructure for this region, but we have observed the conscious effort on the part of the cities identified to improve on their infrastructure. I believe that the countries identified are well aware of the requirements and the nuances of the industry and are making things happen when it comes to building their respective infrastructure, such as broadband connectivity and power supply. Looking at the right side of the slide, the infrastructure rank out of 133. Technically, all the locations identified made it to the top 100, except for Zambia, which is ranked at 111. Now, of course, we all know the requirement of the industry in terms of redundancy and a very stable power supply, because obviously this would send a message across that there is operational continuity and thus reducing downtime. Slide 9 is another interesting slide because it talks about the business environment. The business environment for this particular presentation would be about political and social risk rankings. Now, this is another area for improvement for this region, but they're getting better at it. This is also a very sensitive topic for the region, one which they should pay special attention on. Except for 2 locations, none of the identified cities have breached the halfway mark in terms of political risk ranking. Numbers look much better when we take note of the social risk ranking. Some locations actually scored quite well in the ease of doing business ranking, with Mauritius obtaining a score of 17. Now, various government agencies are well aware of the issue, and they have formed initiatives to smoothen the procedures to start the business, number 1, protect the investor, and reduce the corruption. Now, political risk scores must be further improved in the region, as I've said, but we've seen very positive developments in both regions, which strengthens their possibility